Black supremacies, Nattyisisyah. Join the website www.kingnobleuncensored.com. Subscribe to this channel. Subscribe to King Noble's channel. Lord Yeshana. Like the video, rate it, subscribe, share the video. So I want to start this video by first of all commending the sister who took this pose, a stance, who made this statement by taking this picture here. To me, it is a definite and clear sign that Black people are winning. Now, the sister who took this picture, I don't necessarily know her. I don't really have any way of figuring out who she is or contacting her. The one source that I do have, I'm not sure if it's her actual page. But from what I did see, the sister has been getting a lot of flack. Apparently, somewhere in the conscious community, it is against some unwritten rules that if you're seeking spiritual enlightenment, if you're on a path to Black liberation, if you are an aspiring revolutionary, there are somewhere some unwritten rules that you are not to revert back to your natural self. You are not to go against the system. You are not to go against the grain. I don't know how anybody considers himself conscious, pro-Black, Black revolutionary, awoken, woke. I don't know how anybody considers themselves to be any of that and to hold the same values and ideals as your average so-called sleep person, as your average so-called Christian, as your average person in the matrix. And this is the problem with the conscious community, is that every time Black brothers, Black sisters get closer and closer out of the matrix, somebody who considers himself conscious in particular comes along and says, oh no, you cannot do that. We don't do that. This is not Africa. You are not a god. You are not a goddess. They come back and they tell you these things. But at the same time, they turn around and say, well, you know what? You ain't no revolutionary. You don't care about your people. You're a cult. You shouldn't do this. You're a groupie. They come back and they say these things. They offer no solution. And when you try and when you make moves and you make bold statements that go against the matrix and show where it is that we are winning, and when you show the loopholes and when you flex in these loopholes and when you flex out the matrix, they want to say, you know what you're doing is wrong. We need to come together and we need to bang on her. We need to bang on him. We need to stop this right now. And that is the issue that has been going on with this sister from what I've seen in this picture here. We need to stop policing our Black brothers and sisters for waking up and for taking moves out of the matrix. And how I see this is being done is that somebody will come and say, well, you know, what she's doing is wrong. I don't like what she's doing. Come at the sister real hard. Try to invoke fear in the sister. Try to invoke shame in the sister. And try to get the sister to basically go back in the matrix. And it's the same thing I was talking about in my Beyonce video, which in the comments clearly went over a lot of people's heads. But clearly, people don't need to even go as far as what I see that the so-called Illuminati or the Beyonce is doing. People, they don't need to go that far to do all these rituals to get a lot of you back into the matrix, because you all got that program running 24/7 on overdrive. Now, in this instance, we have here what is the equivalent to a weed, a blade of grass, a tree, bustling and booming and bursting through the concrete. In this concrete jungle, this sister represents nature and the unstoppable force that it holds, bursting through the concrete that is supposed to be holding us back, bursting through this brick wall, this horizontal brick wall that white supremacy has built years and years ago. Trump talking about building a vertical brick wall, but there has been this matrix concrete jungle that has been built over our ancestral land. And this sister represents that one life force, finding that one crack, that one hole in the matrix, and bursting through that to do what? To breastfeed her daughter. And you all have a problem with that. A lot of people have a problem with that. Now, from what I see, the argument is that she's doing this to be a feminist, or the argument keeps changing. First, it's she's being attacked because what she's doing represents feminism somehow. Breastfeeding your black child, if you're a black woman, somehow represents feminism right off the bat. You don't need no information, no facts, nothing. You can't see it. You can't look at it any other type of way. It's just this matrix concept, and that's the only way to give meaning to what it is that you're looking at. So she's being attacked for feminism. Then the argument changes, and I've seen this before. The argument changes to, well, there's all these white rapists, predators lurking in the streets. That's why we as black women shouldn't go topless. That's why we as black women shouldn't breastfeed in public. That's why we as black women shouldn't expose any of our skin, and we should wear 10,000 pounds of fabric from our head to our toe and cover every instance of skin. We should walk around with a burqa, as though we're Muslim. When y'all know y'all not that disciplined to do a lot of what it is that you associate with Muslims. But you want to invoke, it's convenient. You only invoke this convenient type of Sharia law when it is convenient to how comfortable you are with expressing your blackness and expressing your Africanness, that you promote all the other hours out the day, or you try to give the illusion that you promote all the other hours of the day. But when somebody actually takes you up on this and goes and expresses that, you come down on them with the fear of the white man. There's this white predator lurking. There's this white rapist lurking. There's a pedophile lurking. There's a homosexual lurking behind every light pole. That's the argument you bring. So she should cover up her titty. She shouldn't breastfeed because there's a pedophile behind, behind that car driving behind her, behind a light pole, or in the store across the street. So she should cover up. She shouldn't breastfeed. Then the next argument you bring, because the feminism and the pedophile wasn't real enough, is that this is child endangerment. You're using that child as a sex toy. You're using the child as for sexual gratification. And it's like, at what point and how far are you willing to go to invoke shame and fear on your black brother and sister for being the natural entity that they were here and that they were put on this earth to be, for doing what it is that comes natural? Because even then you go as far as to say, well, in Africa, you don't see black women breastfeeding their child and taking pictures with a cell phone for something that they normally naturally do. Well, of course not. Because for one, you're not necessarily looking for those pictures. And if you did, you would see the value that picture has. But over here, when you see it on the American continent, or when you see it in the Americas, you say, well, you know what? She just wants attention. She's just attention craving, whoremongering. She's sick. She's sadistic. She needs attention. She got a mental illness. She putting her child in danger. And then you will use these arguments to say, well, you know what? Let's unify against her. Let's galvanize. Let's come together. And let's attack this sister. Let's attack this woman for breastfeeding her child in public because she's a feminist. There's pedophiles lurking on the street behind every light pole. And she's getting sexual pleasure out of breastfeeding that child right there. So since the feminists aren't claiming her fast enough because she black, so they could really care less. Since the homosexual, the pedophile lurking behind every light post hasn't raped her and her child in broad daylight in broad public quick enough, and since the child service hasn't come and snatched that child up, these so-called conscious people, these so-called awakened, enlightened beings, these so-called elevated people who are pro-black, pan-Africanists say, well, you know what, since all that's not happening fast enough, let's take this into our own hands. Since the white massa won't do it quick enough, let's take this all into our own hands and let's go grab that sister, beat her up, kick that stool from beneath her, grab that child, and bring that child over to child services ourselves. And who cares if we get locked up in the process? We cleaning up the streets. That's how y'all look at this. It is insane. And if you don't believe me, there's literally a sister that said that she would kick that stool from up underneath her to exact whatever type of punishment that she felt and deemed necessary for this beautiful sister, melanated sister, breastfeeding this light being in front of her. She was so disgusted to see a mother breastfeeding her child without a shawl, without 10,000 pounds of fabric, without a burqa, without all these type of coverings. And the fact that she had the audacity to do this in public on a busy street, damn near on the street, bothered her so much. It irked her so much that if she could teleport into the computer screen and kick the stool from beneath the black woman breastfeeding the black child that she deemed was in danger, and so she's going to protect the child and protect exact judgment on the mother. She's going to protect the child by kicking the stool from underneath the mother and the child. Now, does this make any sense to you? Do any of you see the mental illness inside of this? Because if you don't, you might be one of these type of people I'm describing, and you might be part of the problem. How is the violence going to solve this problem? How is violence against your own people going to solve this problem? And then many of you will be the same ones to turn around and say, oh, look what's going on in Chicago. When it's the same thing going on in other instances. You all just don't have the gun in your hand. You all are just not in Chicago. Because had the same sister is galvanizing black men to come against this woman, asking, what do you think we should do about this? How do you feel about women breastfeeding in public? It's none of their goddamn business. But if this was another scenario set in, say, for example, in Chicago, and you do this, now you got all these sisters, these brothers coming against his sister. Then her man goes and decides to go against them. Then you got brothers all just wiped out. Who needs Trump? When we got people, we are attacking our own people like that for doing what comes natural. So you all need to analyze just how much you are contributing to the system of white supremacy. And I want to say that I see what the problem is. And it's a little more than just saying the Willie Lynch. What I see is not only a lot of jealousy, black hate, and envy, but I also see the very same shame and fear that you are trying to lay over onto the sister and sisters like her. And it's not just this instance, because I've seen this many times. And the fear is that whenever conscious people, conscious brothers and sisters, really start exercising their abilities and their awokenness and what they've become enlightened to, whenever they start to really believe and live in that and do that and be that and have that, many other conscious brothers and sisters, they see that, and because they are not ready to leap into that being and into those dimensions and those state of consciousness and beinghood, they don't want to do those things. They don't want to do, be, and have, because they're afraid of how others are going to look at them. They're afraid that somebody else is going to say, you know what, you shouldn't do that. They're afraid that other people are going to say, well, you know what, you're endangering that child. That child is, being sexually exploited. They are afraid of the very same things that they say, because they're thinking these things are running through their head. So they know it's got to be running through somebody else's head. And they're afraid to have to deal with that. So every time they see somebody else get closer and closer to true Black liberation and true Black freedom, because remember, Black liberation and Black freedom is, for a large part, mental. So if you're mentally shackled, how are you going to physically express your freedom? How are you going to physically get out of mental slavery? So when they see somebody who is not under the same mental slavery, or who is less mentally enslaved and who is more free and more liberated, they want to first try to mentally enslave that person through shame, fear, doubt, lack, and limitation. And when that doesn't work, they try to go straight to the white man himself. Oh, social services, you're sexually exploiting the child, you're endangering the child. They try the whole homosexual, pedophile, fair thing, tactic. That doesn't work. They try to shame tactic. Oh, you're trying to be like these white women. That doesn't work. So then they resort to just all out violence, zombie mentality. And this zombie mentality is running through the conscious community, and it needs to be dealt with, or there will not be a conscious community. I don't think the conscious community has very much longer. I think this year might be the end of what we know as the conscious community, because it's coming to a rise now. It's coming to a head now. And it needs to be dealt with. It needs to be brought to heel. The zombie conscious community needs to be brought to a heel. Because you got a lot of people, they're not conscious. They're just trying to fit in. Because they got to a certain age, they got online, they watched a few videos, and they couldn't help but to see that there was a certain type of energy amongst those who consider themselves part of the conscious community. So by default, they are agents and zombies in the conscious community, not necessarily because they want to be, not necessarily because they're being paid, but because they have not dealt with their own mental enslavement and their own mental shacklement. They have not turned off their Willie Lynch chip, but they are still claiming the title of being conscious, being goddess, being woke, being enlightened, being liberated, being revolutionary. No, you need to deal with your mental slavery first. You need to deal with your mental enshacklement. You need to deal with your lack, doubt, limitation, your worries, your fears, your concerns. If the sister wants to walk around topless and bottomless, that is her prerogative. And if she wants to do it with the baby on her hip or on her back, she should have the freedom and the liberation to do that. We need to deal with this whole everybody has to be like me, everybody has to do what I say, everybody has to think alike mentality. That is why a lot of us tried to be a part of the conscious community in the first place, because we were learning new information, seeing that not everything is the way that we thought it was, not everything is what we learned in school. There's actually radical different information out here that is not everything that we've been taught. And that this one little thing that I always felt other people thought made me odd, or that I was made fun of or ridiculed about, there's actually thousands of other people, or at least hundreds, at least 10 other people that I could type to, I could connect with right now that are interested. I could join a group. I could find a hashtag, and all these people are interested in the same thing I'm interested in. Now, do I think that this sister should be ostracized and isolated into a little group on Facebook, or a little group hashtag on Instagram, or a little group of friends or a group of people with like minds in a little house somewhere, or they should all go and just isolate themselves and only breastfeed in public amongst each other? No, nor would that work, because the minute they do that in real life, you all would call them a cult. Conscious people in the conscious community who could be considered a cult just in and of itself, would look at this sister if she really decided that, you know what, she's just going to go amongst like-minded people just to get away from the ridicule of the conscious community. But then those same people would turn around and call her a cult. So it's too much hypocriticalness in the conscious community, too many hypocrites in the conscious community, too many contradictions. If anything, this needs to be looked at as a beautiful display of motherhood, one that needs to be revered, honored, just as our ancestors did, one that needs to be replicated, duplicated, promoted, and propagated, just as our ancestors did. And no, we should not need to go all the way to Africa to breastfeed our baby topless in public. We should not even be looking at this land as anything other than ours. We should be turning this into Africa, America, if necessary and if need be. Because the only thing that really truly makes this landmass separate and different is that there is an American flag on damn near every building that you see, and some concrete, and some white people running around. But this sister does not need to be looked at as something that needs to be stomped out as a plague on the black community. It's something that is going to put us and all our babies in danger of feminism, pedophiles, homosexuals, rapists. That ideology, those theories, those need to be squashed and dealt away with. Because we're not going to get the liberation that we're looking for like that by attacking each other with that type of mentality. And for those who don't know, who may be wondering what makes this picture such a powerful display of womanhood, of pro-black liberation, of freedom, of enlightenment, of true empowerment, of true liberation, for those of you who might question how this is not just merely mimicking feminism, or how this is not endangering your child or exposing them to predators, or why you shouldn't be automatically calling some type of child services to kidnap this child. For those of you who don't see the significance in this type of display, not too long ago, like just a generation ago, the women our mother's age were not encouraged to breastfeed. They were encouraged to do the opposite, to buy powdered milk, what they call formula, which was nothing but over-the-counter prescription drugs that you inoculate your children with under the auspices of feeding them, giving them all type of things you can't even pronounce in a $25 to $50 container, under the illusion that it's just milk. It's just formula, or even to give your child milk to fuel the dairy industry and the pharmaceutical industry. So when a woman breastfeeds and when she can do this in public, it's a powerful display of black liberation, of black enlightenment, of us coming back into power and to being our true selves. This is a snippet and a sample of what it looks like when we gonna rule again. So those same black men that you can galvanize and try to usher in to attack this sister because you claim that she is at risk of pedophiles and rapists behind every light pole, those same black men that you can get together and gather, you should be using them. Why can't you gather them to go and defeat the system, to unify against the system? Not your sister, but the system. This is Nattyisisyah. Join the website www.kingnobleuncensored.com. Subscribe to King Noble, or subscribe to Lord Yeshua on YouTube. Like this video, rate this video, share it. Black supremacy.